Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back everyone to the afternoon session of the Coaches Conference. I'm glad to see everyone back after a good lunch. And I'm very happy to introduce Chelsea Warr for this fantastic session that's about to start. Chelsea Warr is the Director for Performance at UK Sport. Has a great story to tell. And before I start to give a little bit of background on Chelsea, the advertising block up front, anything you will hear, you will also be able to read in this book, which is for sale on Amazon for roughly about £20. So feel free to go online and purchase it later on. So the advertising block up front. Chelsea Warr has been with UK Sport for since 2005 and joined the program as the head of the Pathway program and deeply involved with the talent ID and pathway development for all of Great Britain's high-performance sports. And I think we all know how big of a success story sports has been, or high-performance sports has been in Great Britain, coming from 1996 with 1 gold medal, leading all the way to the home Olympics in 2012 with 34 gold medals. And I'm pleased to introduce Chelsea Warr to give us some more details on how they managed to progress, and maybe we can all learn something for our nations. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you very much. Right. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, a very special thank you for the privilege to come and speak at your conference this afternoon. I get lots of different invitations to speak to different audiences, but whenever I have the opportunity to speak with coaches or athletes, I have to say you're always first on my list. And it was only yesterday that I was with my own team, and we were discussing, what the future of elite coaching will look like, and who are the types of athletes that you'll be coaching in the future. And I remember saying to my team, if you want to have world-class hospitals, you have to have world-class coaches. If you want to have a world-class elite sporting programs, you have to have world-class coaches. There's just no way around it. And I was also thinking this morning that when can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Right. Can I move this one out of the way? Is that all right? Yeah. That's better. Can everybody hear me? Okay, that's better. So I was thinking when I was driving down here this morning, if we aggregated up all of the medals and medalists you've all developed over the years as coaches, if we added them all up together, the intellectual property in this room would be probably very, very significant. So I do feel, particularly privileged to be here today. So the stimulus of my presentation comes from this book. So I'm not here to sell this book. I'm not a salesperson. I'm the Director of Performance in UK Sport. But what this book does talk to is this amazing transformation and this very privileged journey that a lot of people in this room have been on of the Great Britain high performance system. And all the stories that are in here are about the coaches and the athletes and the practitioners that have all worked together over the last 20 years to try and, develop a system that is now a very, very special place to work in every day. But I was also thinking, if you did buy one of these books from Amazon, that actually you would be bankrolling the medal machine of Sir David Tanner in Caversham, because all the proceeds from this book go back into the high performance of Great Britain. So I thought that would be interesting, wouldn't it? You all supporting us, going forward. So I'm not here to support to sell the book today, but I'm just here just to tell you about some of the stories from some of the book that I think you might be interested in. And in the book, actually, there is a really lovely chapter. It's chapter 16, and it is about Sir David Tanner, who has been one of our most successful performance directors here in the high performance system today, and someone who I turn to quite often to get some very wise counsel on a variety of issues around high performance sport. So there's 3 chapters in here today that I've drawn out that I'd like to share with you a little bit about. We're going to talk a bit about finding and developing talent. I'm going to share with you some results of a really big study that I did started in 2014, looking at serial gold medalists and the profile of serial gold medalists. And I'm also going to get you to do a bit of a workshop in the last part of the session today, which is about futurology. What will the future of your sport actually look like, and how are you starting to respond to that? Because that's a lot of what this book is about. It's about future-proofing your system. Okay, so the Talent Lab, as I said, is about this remarkable stories of the people, particularly the people that enabled this transformation of the high-performance system from 36 on the medal tally all the way, 36 on the medal tally back in Atlanta, all the way up to second on the medal tally in Rio. And it's about the people, and it's about the projects that these people delivered, but most of all it's about the skill and the will of some pretty talented people who really, really committed over the last sort of 20 years to help build this system. And I guess the book takes you on that journey. But I think it's important just first of all to understand the context of how this system has actually developed, and probably where it started, to appreciate where it's got to today. So if we go back to 1996, before UK Sport, which is the agency I work for, before we were even invented, I guess, before the National Lottery was even involved, and before we had these things called world-class programs, which are the elite sport programs, we were 36 on the Olympic medal table. There were 15 medals that were delivered back then, only one gold medal, thank you to Redgrave and Pinsent. Interestingly, only one female medal back then, which was from a lady called Denise Lewis in heptathlon. And I guess that was the sort of the rock bottom of the system. And it took a very brave politician to say, actually, we could be really good at sport. We're going to have to start investing it much more systematically. We're going to have to get quite intelligent about how we do this. But this is actually where we started back in 1996. And I distinctly remember in about 2002 when I first arrived into the UK high performance system here. And what I was trying to get a picture of is what did the sporting landscape actually even look like. And I asked a colleague of mine to share with me some sort of schematic that would give me a picture of how the whole system was working. And this was the picture that he gave me. And this was a schematic taken out of a reference document that tried to describe what the high performance landscape looked like at that stage. And as you can see, it's hugely duplicative, it's very congested, and I would often call it I referred to it as the spaghetti slide, because actually if you were an athlete and you had any ambition, or you're a coach and you wanted to get into a career pathway about coaching, where did you even start when you've got a system that pretty much looked like this? And it's quite hard to even find sport in that landscape. So this is kind of what we looked like back in 2002. This was an official government document. Now the interesting, I think I've just lost my microphone. Hang on just a minute. Sorry. I think. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you give me a hand? Just pin it to on the top there. That's it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Right, here we go, back again. And what's interesting about this is this talks about a map of sport in England. And if you know, in the UK, we've got four home nations. We've got England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And so when we compete at the Olympic and Paralympic Games, we compete as all of those home countries come together. But what I soon found out was, while this was a map of sport in England, there was actually a spaghetti slide in all of the other home nations as well. So when you put this whole thing together, it was very, very duplicated and not particularly intelligent. That's kind of where we started. So then we went on this very rapid journey over the course of 20 years. And I think if I could sort of describe three big things that I think made a very big difference. And the first one is important context behind it. The first one is about money. It is about sustained investment from the great British public through the sales of lottery, but also through government and exchequer investment. And there's always that misnomer, is, you know, more money in is medals out the other end. That's not actually the story that sits behind, I think, the Great Britain's high performance systems success to date. It's actually where you put that money and how you apply that money intelligently, right from government down into agencies like UK Sport, all the way down into sporting programs, and then how from the sporting programs that reaches the front line with the athletes and coaches, and how that all kind of orchestrates together is actually what really makes the difference. The things that also sit in this transformation is about skill and about will. The skill of the people that are involved in the system and their expertise, but also most importantly the will. And like any industry that goes through some rapid transformation, you will often find some very, very hugely committed and hugely enthusiastic people who really, really want to make this happen. And there's so many of those fantastic people in the high performance system to date and continue to be, that we have the privilege to work with. And so over the course of 20 years, this is basically what's been built. So most of the places now, most of the sports that you will go and visit in Great Britain, they have a setup that looks like this. So we've got a program that's very specifically around talent identification and talent confirmation and talent development. So sports fishing for talent, and people arriving into their sport not by accident, but by design, and then going about a process to know whether they actually have the talent to be world class. And then if you get through the talent identification and confirmation phase, you'll transition to what we call the apprenticeship phase. Quite often it's junior international, emerging under 23s, a senior international type level is this kind of apprenticeship type phase. We call that the World Class Podium Potential Program. And then if you get through there, you go through what we call to the Podium Program, and this is like finishing school. And you all know in the room that's often living something like 180 days a year out of a suitcase. It's about precision. It's about enormous mental and physical dedication and a commitment to wanting to be the very, very best in the world. So this was us about getting organised, getting aligned, about getting focused, about how we were going to win more medals on the world stage. I guess this kind of starts to give you a bit of an oversight of what that progression has looked like over the course of the last sort of 20 years. And as you can see, not only growth in sort of medals, but also gold medals. But I think that probably the biggest, most significant step when we really started to get focused was obviously when we had a home games in London. So the kind of era where Beijing moving into London was where we had a marked step. And I guess the other interesting point to make here too is about being able to sustain success from having a home games, which I'll show you another slide in a minute about what that looks like. And this is in the Paralympics. So a similar sort of increase in the medal tally. Paralympic, a little bit more variable, definitely more changeable. More varied in the way that we approached, and I guess everybody knows in this room, in order to win in the Paralympic environment, you've got to be very agile, you've got to be very responsive to the environment that you're working in. 147 medals delivered in Rio in the Paralympic sports. And I think the thing that we are most proud of, and I guess the reason why we wrote this book in many ways, is there hasn't been a nation in the modern Olympics that has been able to maintain its medal tally post hosting home games. And I don't know if there's anybody in China from here, but even the mighty China was unable to maintain their medal haul after post-hosting in Beijing. And I think that was the thing that we were most proud of in Great Britain, is being able to set about building a system step by step, keeping it sustainable, thinking about all the decisions that we make along the way about how we would sustain success. So, and obviously now our challenge is when you get to second on the medal tally in both the Olympic and the Paralympics, how do you sustain success? What are the things that you've got to do differently in order to not just stay where you are, but keep moving forward? And we often talk about that continuous commitment, continuous mindset and commitment to excellence, and continuous dissatisfaction of the status quo. And I think that's one of the things that I continually see in the high performance system here. People just not satisfied that we couldn't actually be better in a lot of areas of our work. So I'd like to share with you, a couple of the chapters in the Talent Lab which sort of talk about this notion of continuous commitment and a curiosity, I think, of learning. So in the book, we talk about what we call these sort of the difference between the peanuts and the coconuts. So the peanuts are the little things that are not that important, but then every high performance system and every elite sport program, you'll have your coconuts. The big things that are really, really important that you should never take your eye off, because they're the things that enable sustained success. So I'm going to talk to you about what we've learned as a whole high performance industry, what the big coconuts are. But I think these things chain down right down to a coach and athlete working every day to pursue something really, really special. So this is what we learned. If I can bottle everything together about this transformation, this is what we've learned. First thing is you need a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Some sort of goal that compels you to strive for something that actually might be quite scary, but something that's actually going to take you on. And one of the first things we did when we came out of the back of London as the system is we set out with a big BHAG of 66 121. 66 Olympic medals, 121 Paralympic medals. Could the system do it? And that big white flag was put out in the sand in the front, and it drove a lot of certainly what we were doing at UK Sport, the decisions that we were making, where we were investing, and how we were trying to support sports, drive towards that big, hairy, audacious goal. And I know a colleague of mine who I work with, he will often say to me, if your goals are not scary enough, they're probably not big enough, which is probably true. And we also, we learned a lot about making sure we paid attention to the basics, and we call those the performance hygiene factors. And everybody in this room knows when you're coaching athletes, it's about selecting great athletes, it's about giving them great coaches, it's about providing them with expert training and competition plans, it's about getting them to practice regularly under pressure, so develop those arena skills, wrapping around science, medicine and technology support, making sure they don't get sick, making sure they don't get injured, and quickly removing distractions as they come into the environment. So keeping those performance hygiene factors at the front and centre of everything you're doing every day, working with coaches and athletes, is really, really important. And certainly in UK Sport, we had to think about what are the basics that we need to keep the system in place, that we must also not take our eye off. And then there's the two T's, teamwork and talented people. I think as a system, we learn how to develop better relationships and great team working, whether it was working with our Olympic or Paralympic committees, whether it was UK Sports relationships with sports or sports relationships with UK Sport, whether it was coach and athlete partnerships, and the coaches working together a lot more as well and sharing their ideas and their intelligence. And what we all learn is we learn faster together and we make less mistakes when we can work as a team. But sitting under that teamwork is a really, really important word about trust. And to the point that you can get that trust, and when you've got that trust, the breakthroughs that you can make are really, really significant. And talented people. We are a people business. We're definitely a people business. And looking after our people and developing our people and making sure that our people understand about bringing the next generation of people coming through is really, really critical. And the one about talent pathway and succession planning, it's a really key one, which is I think in the UK we not only invest in these 4-year pathways, but we actually commit to building a pathway on an 8-year basis. So looking 8 years reverse back from podium and thinking about the athletes and the staff that are going to be around in order to develop these athletes through. And I probably mention on that, one of the important things that I think coaches or any senior leaders need to think more and more carefully about going forward is that who are your succession plans? So everybody in this room should have in your mind who are the 3 people that you know now that you could help develop that would not only know what you know, but actually could be even better at doing your job in the future. So who are your succession plans, and how do you go about your business every day, encouraging those people to learn what you've learnt and what they could be, how they could develop to be even better doing your job in the future. And that's how you start to create sustainable systems, is you get more good people coming through the system, understanding the culture and understanding what you do and how you do it. And of course, expert practitioners. A big central part of our high-performance system is also not just the coaches, but also the medics and the doctors and the physiotherapists and the analysts and all these people, how they work together as a team. So these have been the big things, I think, over the last particularly 20 years from a more macro perspective that have allowed some of this transformation to happen. So back to this book. So I'm going to talk to you about sort of 3 chapters in the book, and I'm going to stop along the way because I want you to have a bit of a chat with each other about some of the things that I'll talk about. And the 3 chapters are about identifying and developing talent. There's a bit about the serial gold medal study, so looking at these exceptional high performers, and I'm going to finish on some futurology. So what do you think the future of your sport will look like, and what are your ideas of the big trends and the big mega trends are that you might need to respond to? Okay, so the first chapter that I want to talk to you a little bit about is back in 2007. We ran in partnership with all of our sports across the high performance system. We wanted to start getting better, more intelligent and smarter at developing these 8-year pathways, developing talent identification and development. And I have to say at this stage, around about 2007, British rowing was probably ahead of the pack. It was probably the sport that had kind of cottoned onto this a little bit faster than all the other sports and has started to put in place systems and processes to better identify talent. And in 2007 we ran this, we called it a talent health check. It was across all of the sports in the UK to try and really understand where baseline was at and what was going on across the system. And one of the things that came out of that was there was a number of sports, in basketball, and volleyball, rowing, and handball, who were all after exceptional female talent, really tall talent. And so we put all these sports together and we said, well, why don't we all work together on this? Because there'll be the opportunity to recruit talent and maybe even move it around. If it wasn't quite right for one sport, it could be moved into another. So the sports came together and we worked on this project called Sporting Giants. Now, when I talked about this now, it's I look back then, it was probably quite pioneering in its time back then, but these days this is standard practice across the high performance system now. And we set out with this big advertising campaign to try and identify women who were above 180 centimetres, men who were above somewhere between 190 to 195, and we weren't even that interested at this stage if you hadn't even had a major experience in physical activity to date. So we set out on this advertising campaign, and interestingly, within 24 hours we had about 3,500 people from right across the UK put their hand up, tall people apparently, wanting to come and get involved in this Sporting Giants campaign. So this was literally my computer screen one of the first mornings that I came back in after we'd launched Sporting Giants. So this was really, really, really exciting and turned out to be a really fantastic program that delivered 13 medals in the recent Rio Olympic Games, and interestingly a number of rowing female medalists as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this is one of the really interesting I guess, points of the book is just trying things, being curious and trying things, and stepping out and being courageous in the types of things that you do. And this is a fantastic quote, and I love this quote, which was from a journalist. It was about the time that we launched this Sporting Giants program. And he said, "Yesterday, we witnessed the launch of a campaign to attract, wait for it, tall athletes to compete in the London Games." Tall athletes. Next will be small athletes, or round ones, or squat ones, or big ones, or maybe even bald ones, or long-legged ones with stubby fingers. Please tell me we've got better brains than this in charge of 2012. So I had great delight of putting that in my Christmas card to my parents that particular year with a TBC, dot, dot, dot. But of course, the results of this program, particularly in rowing, was 3 Olympic medalists, 3 very special young women in Helen and Vicky, and another lady who was in the rowing 8 in Rio. That was Karen. And I think at this point it's really important too that I acknowledge, given this is a coaching conference, that there are some very, very special coaches, and they are unique and they are hard to find, who are what I call these magical ignition point coaches, these coaches that romance talent with high potential but no particular performance. And certainly we had a fantastic opportunity through Paul Stannard, who was responsible for particularly drawing in Helen and Vicky as real novices and really getting them on their way. They are very, very special coaches. Paul is a very, very special coach and did a remarkable job with those 2 women, who then handed them on to Robin Williams, who did the finishing school. So that coaching chain and formally recognising those early and founding coaches, I think is really, really important if you want to sustain success. And during this period of time as well, we really wanted to kind of inspire the system about other environments, performance environments that find and develop talent exceptionally well. So we got curious and we went and studied as many different places around the world as we could to try and learn about how they did things. So we looked at the Bolshoi Ballet School in Russia, a 230-year-old institution. Runs a 7-year pathway from starting in the Bolshoi Ballet and graduating to become a principal dancer. A 1-to-4 teacher-to-student ratio. A success rate of 73%. So if you come into the Bolshoi Ballet and you get through year 1, it's highly likely you're going to graduate as a principal dancer. So this was a place that everybody knows around the world that if you want to become a brilliant performer, a brilliant ballerina, then this is the place you go. And the question and the challenge we always have in developing all of our elite sport programs is, how do you create places of excellence that people want to come to because they just have such confidence that if they do, they're highly likely going to make it. So how do you create these dynasty environments that athletes want to come and visit? Now I've gone too far. Right. And the Royal College of Surgeons, we spent a lot of time understanding about how surgical students were assessed before they went on a 7-year journey to become a surgeon, an institution that's over 200 years old. And through following surgeons through the development program over 10 years, really understanding what are the characteristics of a brilliant surgeon, and 2 come up time and time again that are now part of the talent profile of surgeons in the future. Ability to make decisions under pressure, and the capacity to have a ridiculous work ethic. These are 2 of the key criteria that over many years of looking at successful surgeons and unsuccessful surgeons, the things that you actually need to have at the point of when you come into this pretty grueling training program. And the SAS. An interesting institution, an interesting selection process. They're obsessed in making sure, obviously, you hit minimum fitness standards, but also too, they talk a lot about this phrase called talent confirmation, which is basically once you pass the fitness test, is 9 weeks in jungle warfare. can you actually hack it? Do you actually have the skills and the coping skills to be able to thrive in an environment that is super high pressure? So we went and studied the SAS and how they select their soldiers in order to go into battle in some pretty stressful situations. And we spend a lot of time in this place called the Yehudi Menuhin School. It's down in Surrey. It's about an hour from here. 70 students in this music school. Every year, if you want to get into this school, you have to be better than the previous intake. So the standard of musicians that are coming into the school is going up and up and up every year. And again, through profiling expert string musicians that have come through these schools and graduated over many, many years, they're very, very clear about the type of musical student that you need to identify right from the beginning. And they talk about the 4 C's: commitment, communication, concentration, and coordination. Do you have the commitment to be a musician and practice? Can you communicate with the audience, i.e. you've got the hairs on the back of your neck stand up when you actually play the instrument? Have you got concentration to practice? And you're coordinated with your instrument when you perform. And interestingly, every Friday night for 3 hours, they assemble all the children in the school. They bring in all the parents and all the other local schools, and every child comes up on stage and they perform every Friday for 3 hours in front of a recital, in front of all of these audiences, to learn how to practice constantly under pressure and to perform very well at a very, very high standard, very consistently from week to week. It's a very, very impressive school. It's no wonder so many fantastic musicians come out of it. So, what's common about all these fantastic environments that have produced exceptional performers? Well, there's a number of things actually, but probably the one is that they attract and they are able to talent manage people who have extreme commitment and extreme desire and motivation that actually comes from somewhere, which I'll talk to about in a minute. But I think one of our big challenges, if I think about coaching looking forward, particularly in the next 10 years, and some of you might have seen quite a lot of attention about it in the media, is about duty of care in an environment where we attract such extreme athletes, sometimes extreme staff, in order to achieve sort of very superhuman things. And how do we get that balance between robust coaching and bullying, and making sure that we always know which side of the line that we're on, and making sure that we understand that the person that we are working with is changing. And as a conference that I was at last week, I was talking about this digital native, the iPhone, the iPod, the iPad. It's all about the I. It's very customized. It's very personalized. It's all about me. So how do we deal with this new digital native athlete that will be coming into our sporting environments? And how do we adapt our coaching practices to meet the needs of what these athletes will look like in the future? Given we're working in an environment like this, so this is a big challenge. It's not easy. So if I could sort of pull everything together, and in the book it talks about, so what does this all mean about these brilliant, exceptional environments of excellence? And if I could kind of really sum up, what have I learned over the years about developing, world-class talent? Well, first of all, you've got to find a fanatically talented athlete, and you have to find an equally fanatically talented coach. And ideally, when you build systems, you're trying to get those two to come together, not by luck, but by design. You have to find these people who are absolutely prepared, and the expression I'll use is pursue the mundane. Elite sport and what we all do is quite boring. The practice of becoming good is quite a boring exercise. So you have to find people that really want to commit to doing quite boring, process-orientated things. But they have to be able to practice a lot under pressure. There's definitely something about being very clear, and that's the role of the coaches and the scientists working together, of what will win not just now, but what's going to win in the future. And we call it in Great Britain, what it takes to win, WITTW, what it takes to win in the future, and modelling that, and then finding very personalised, very customised ways to look after the athletes, to pursue that future-focused model. And these coaches and the support teams about creating no limits, high challenge, high support environments, equal challenge, equal support environments, making sure no one gets sick, making sure no one gets injured, and when they do, bringing people back, not just mentally, but also physically. Opportunities, choices, no guarantees, and all of this does cost money as well, so we need sustained investment because we know the development of an athlete will take, at a high performance level, will take somewhere between 6 to 8 years as a minimum when you're talking about the 180 days plus out of a suitcase, that type of environment. So if you can get those things in place, you're probably going to get pretty far along that spectrum of sustained success. So what I want to do now is I just want to pause for a minute, and I would like you to just sort of turn to the person next to you, and I just want you to have a little discussion, probably for no more than about 5 minutes. And the question that I want to ask you is that if you were writing a book, and for everything you've ever learned about identifying and developing talent, what would be the key chapters in your book that would talk about what it takes to actually develop talent? What would be the big coconuts, not the peanuts, that would be the key chapters in your book? So about 5 minutes just with the person next to you, and then I might ask a couple of people from the floor to share what your chapters would actually look like.
I would say one important thing to me is getting to know the athlete really well. I found that's probably the most important thing, getting to know them inside out. Once you do that, you open them up fully, and they're more than likely to reciprocate that. And if there's that openness, then you're going to be more likely to succeed.
Can you hear? Yeah. It's going on and off.
Yeah, I know. They're really annoying, these things, because if they're not in exactly the right spot, then the sound is lousy. There we go.
You're right.
Yep, sorted.
Okay, that's right.
You all right?
Yeah.
I think it's the most important is more or less what is found out what
Chapters in your books? Anything?
you have to have to input your own.
We only got peanuts.
You've only got peanuts, no coconuts.
And the coach is
I get it.
the person that will help you actively.
We have a problem that
Step by step.
we have right all on the position.
The main point of the chapter.
Yeah.
Already very athletes, not with the talent.
So you're saying the coach is the facilitator once you've worked out.
Yeah. Being clear what you're looking for would be pretty important, wouldn't it?
What the driving force is. Yeah. It's really good.
But what is a body? Tall, strong, even to look at the 40 or 50-year-old boys and girls, I can say,
In order to
my opinion is that
achieve their goal, what would be one of the most important things for you to look into?
learn,
Yeah.
give them exercise,
Yeah. Yeah.
can they handle it or not?
Yeah.
The other thing is to make the competition.
Yeah.
Look how they work.
Yeah, and how that links with the pathway of the talent. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. And do you have many problems finding elite female talent?
Yes.
Is it harder?
I don't know. I think only not, but it should be possible.
Without that, I think it's not possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we have them, but
Are they going to? Are they going to handball or?
I don't know. Don't get them to the sport. I think
Yeah.
we have them.
Yeah.
Motivate them to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's becoming a different audience now these days. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Where do you coach from? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You are a good person. Problem in you. So, stronger.
How are we going? We're right? Okay. Should we just pause for a minute and I might just ask a couple of people around the room. I have a couple of big, I've got any big coconuts. Rosie, would you like to share a couple of your
We have to be aware
your points, please?
meaningful for the life.
Okay, thank you. We thought that there were probably 4 elements, and the biggest thing was that we were going to have to understand what that environment would look like in the future. So identifying and developing young coaches, this is in no particular order, identifying and developing young coaches, understanding the social environment that we'd be heading into, and the eye athlete, and what will motivate them and what will their thinking be in 4 years, 5 years, 8 years' time. And then understanding the development of the sport in the future. So what direction will it go in? Will it just be about getting fast 2,000 metre times, or will it be completely different disciplines and mixed boats and everything else?
Yes, mixed boats. We've got lots of mixed events to certainly have come in the last IOC rounds. What about this table over here? A couple of ideas you might have had?
So we thought you needed culture, which is a little bit different from environment. You need a pathway. You need standards. That's both for entry, goals, and language, standardized language.
Yeah, so standardising the terminology of how people were talking about things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe the table behind? Do we have a few more?
Who wants to be our speaker? Do you have a list?
Anybody?
They're making me speak for Belgium, actually, for the Belgian table. Although we haven't discussed this in depth, we probably would say that one of the things is probably the individual itself. Like the person you're going to try and promote to be a future Olympic champion. So you really have to make sure that you understand who you have in front of you.
Yeah. Understanding them not only as a performer but also as a person.
Seeing the person before you see the athlete is probably the first thing. The first thing to do.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, all right. So speaking about phenomenal performers, I'm going to share with you a bit of research that I did about almost 5 years ago now when I first started. And it was called the Great British Medalist Study. And basically what we wanted to do was to study the development biographies of serially successful, extraordinarily successful athletes. And these athletes, they were in 2 groups, if you like. One group we called the super elite, and these were athletes who had won at least a gold medal and a minor medal at multiple games. So you had to do it once, but then you had to go away and train really hard again, and then come back and do it again, and then sometimes you might have come back again and again and again. So these were the super elite group. So this was about superior reproducible performance, which is the best definition that we've got of mastery. Okay, and we had 17 of these very, very special athletes in this study, and then they were matched with what I called a nearly twin. So somebody who probably should have made it, were often in the same sport, sometimes even in the same training group, even delivered a world championship or an Olympic medal, but only one medal, but never won another one. And what we wanted to understand was what was it about their developmental histories that allowed one person to go on and make it, not just once, maybe twice, sometimes 6 times, and some that didn't. And what were the discriminating factors about their developmental histories of these athletes? Now, this wasn't just in rowing, this was across a whole variety of sports, but we did have some rowers in this particular study. And the things that we study were things like where they came from. So there's been some theories about that some of the best athletes in the world come from small cities and small towns when they're growing up, not big metropolitan areas. So it was a hypothesis that we wanted to test. We looked at early childhood experiences, things like sibling rivalry and IQ even. We looked at the training and practices, the profile of how much they practice in their sport and the competitive history, what the relationships were like with coaches, their founding coach, their middle coach, their apprenticeship coach, and also their kind of finishing school coaches, their psychological state, their personality, and the environments that they were in along the way. And we spoke to quite often all their school teachers, we spoke to their founding coaches and the coaching chain, and we spoke to quite often their families, like their brothers and sisters or their parents, to try and piece the story together about these incredible athletes. So there were over 100 medals that were won, world and Olympic medals, with this fantastic group. Over 1,400 hours of interviews with the athletes themselves, the coaches and parents, and sometimes school teachers. I think it was something like 8,500 pages of interview transcripts and 43 questions, very specific questions that we wanted to know about these very special athletes. But there's this great quote, isn't it? And it says, "Data without insight is entertainment, and insight without action is trivia." So what we've been doing over the last 4 years is, once we've learnt about this study, we've been feeding this back into the high performance system and into all the development pathways and through a lot of our education programs to make sure that we can figure out how to make our pathways even better. So there were actually there was 47 statistically significant findings, so I'm clearly not going to share all of those with you today. We have actually published quite a lot of this work now, but I'm going to share with you some of the big headlines that were quite interesting. For us. So the first one is that the super elite athletes, they were born earlier in the year, so we often talk about the birth date effect. They were born earlier in the year, and a disproportionate number of them were born in small cities and towns, not in big metropolitan areas. That's not new. That sort of finding's been around for quite some time now in other studies that have been done. But there's something there, the small cities and small towns, there's something about more personalised coaching, more customised coaching from a young age that is something to take. That's the bit about small cities and towns. We also found out that super elite athletes, believe it or not, they just do more. They've done more their whole sporting careers. They've done more in their primary sport, they've done more in other sports, and they've just done more basic physical activity. So that notion of 10,000 hours of practice to become an elite athlete is pretty true. They just do more. So you are looking for very, very physically active people. Early sporting success was not necessarily predictor of senior international success. We know that varies across sports, but certainly a lot of the sports we studied I think the expression of the kiss of death, winning a World Junior Championship medal sometimes would be the kiss of death to going on to becoming a senior international performer. So therefore, that original profile that you identify right back 8 years ago needs to be in the context of a senior international performance, not a junior winner. We also found out in this study that our super elite athletes, they specialised much later, mean age of about 17.5 than the elite athletes. There's something about being exposed to a wide variety of sports for as long as you possibly can, that when you finally specialise in your primary sport, the time it takes you to then win a medal is compressed. So it sort of go slow to go fast is the kind of expression that we would often use. So looking for a multi-talented athlete seems to have some sort of effect of being able to sort of to sustain the last hurdle upwards to be an Olympic athlete. And also too, we also found that our super elite athletes spent more time in other sports up until the mean age of 17.5 than in their primary sport. Interesting. This sounds really obvious and really simple, but it just came through so profoundly in everything we studied about our super elite and elite, is that the nature and type of coaching and your interaction with the athletes in the super elite, even from a young age, was highly personalised and highly customised. It was really about attending to my needs and not necessarily the needs of the whole squad. And that's something that I guess is easier to say, difficult to do often than when you're running big programs and you're running big squads. But there's something very important about this personalised and customised experience. The super elite athletes, they really craved feedback. They're like feedback hoovers. They just wanted to know more and more about how they were performing. And what was really interesting is when they critiqued their performances, they would often set out with these things called mastery goals versus outcome goals. So the super elite athletes were very precise at being able to measure their performance in a mastery sense. So even if they won a race, even if they won an Olympic medal, they would quickly go into debriefing of how the race broke down, how they actually did they perform all the process goals on the way of the performance to achieve it, versus an outcome goal, which is I got first and I won the medal, I'm happy. So the super elite athletes were more focused on the process of winning the medal and achieving mastery in every part of that, as opposed to just the outcome. And interesting, the super elite athletes too had a disproportionate amount of what we call a childhood trauma. Absent mother, absent father, learning difficulties at school, a significant death in the family, somewhere between the ages of 6 to 12, that had some very profound mental effect on that particular individual. And then that had to be coupled at a time where they actually were connected with sport and then had a very, very positive experience. But there is definitely some sort of connection between an early childhood trauma and those that go on to kind of want to be drawn to the pressure zone of competing, overcoming it, which sport enabled them to do in the past, that kind of perpetuates this cycle of putting yourself back into trying to win a medal, and then another medal, and then another medal, which is quite a lot of psychodynamic work going on there behind the scenes. Okay, so just to wrap up, one of the chapters in the book too talks about what we call futurology. So what will the future of elite sport, or what will the future of rowing look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years time? And what we're all learning really fast is that the world is changing very, very rapidly, and the nations and the sports that can adapt the fastest, pay attention to what's going around you and reading the signals, are the ones that can actually embrace the change and then keep moving on. And what we did back in 2014, knowing that we were going to prepare all the strategic plans for the high performance system, looking forward to the Tokyo cycle and Paris, was we spent a lot of time in UK sport working with our sports to try and understand what the future of elite sport was going to look like. But we did this really interesting piece of work where we thought, well, we're actually going to engage with people who are not necessarily from our world, but have an empathy with performance. And we're going to ask them about, from their perspective, what are the things that will shape, the big trends and mega trends that will shape our industry, elite sport, in the future. And so we spoke to people from the military, healthcare, we had analysts from Silicon Valley come over and talk to us about data and big data. We even spoke to, really interesting, we spoke to agents that look after performers on shows like The X Factor, that are managing young talent and that relationship with the media and the kind of the personal brand, to try and understand what's that going to be like for us in the future in the elite sport world. And we found out lots of very, very interesting things about what our world is looking like, not just in the immediate future, but also in the long-term future, and started to put plans in place within the high-performance system to make sure that we're future-proofing ourselves. So I'd like to leave you with a bit of a task now to have a think about what your world, particularly in rowing, is going to look like going forward. So what I'd like you to do is just in your tables, and I'll probably kind of section you off, is have a bit of a chat about these questions. So what are the big trends and mega trends that's really going to define what elite rowing looks like by 2024? What are the big disruptive innovations that are coming over the hill that you can see now that you might need to be thinking about in terms of the athletes that you select, the way you run and orchestrate your programs? What will superhuman performances look like in rowing by 2024? How will you be managing athlete health and physical health? How will successful performance leaders and coaches, how will you actually be operating in 2024? How are you going to be managing big data and technology? Because the type of athlete that is coming into your program, they are the digital native. They absolutely engage via technology. So how will you as coaches engage with them and their need to be more digitally savvy? And I guess one of the big questions we've been talking a lot in Great Britain is, what will those relationships look like between coaches and athletes in the future? What is it now, and what will it look like by 2024? And how will we need to respond and adapt to that? So this is a bit about looking into the future and thinking about what the world's going to be like, and then how we respond to that. So I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 questions up there. So what I'm going to do is the table over here, up the back here. So as we just go along, this table here, 1 and 2. Can you do question number 1 for us? Yeah? And then, sorry, I'm pointing, but following along here, your table there, this table at the back there, and this table here. If you can do question 2 and 3 for us, that'd be okay? Have a discussion about that one. And over the back here, so that table there, this table here, this table here. If you could have a maybe look at sort of 3 and 4, questions 3 and 4. This table over here and this table here, these group, if you can sort of have a look at 5 and 6. And then the last 2 tables up the back here, if you can go back to 1s and 2s, have a look at questions number 1s and 2s. And this group over here, you can have a look at the 3s and 4s. Question 3s and 4s up there. So have a discussion within your table. And just scribble a couple of things down, and then it'll be really good if you can think of one spokesperson from your table that we'd like to hear from to report back, okay? So you've got about 10 minutes to have a good discussion on those, okay? Sorry, I was pointing. Could you sort of, you're up the back. You're all right, yeah. Are you?
Because we're new members of rowing, we presented this morning.
Oh, right. Oh, hello, join in. You're right. Question 1 and 2, you guys?
One.
Can you? You only want 1? You can do two.
We can do it.
You could swing them together. Yeah. What are the things you're most worried about? That's how I look at that. What are the things you think, cracky, they're going to come up and bite us on the backside, and we need to. Yep. Yep.
So when you say trend, is it trend, so it's the direction?
Yes. Themes that might be coming that will change the way we're operating. So a good example would be the IOC decide to change the event calendar. So we're going to have relays and 200-metre events. Okay, that's going to change the type of athlete that you recruit, and that will change the type of coaches that you might be utilising. It might change the type of conditioning of an athlete, because it might be a more sprint-based athlete, or so things that are coming this way you would change. Does that make sense?
I think one of the trends il trend we're saying what about right these subjects will change a little bit the shape from 2024 to 7 years time. My point of view, I think it's also the tendency is now to time much so long now most of the countries towards the more financially, and then maybe the number of hours with training and I think that's going to change.
So we need some system to sort it out.
And I wonder with the athlete that's coming in the bottom of this machine, is going to be less physically capable, because we know that physical activity, certainly in Great Britain here, that the standard of physical fitness and physical literacy of athletes is getting less and less and less. Because less in schools, less play, more choice. As growing up now, so the standard of fitness is lower. So therefore, trying to get into elite sport programs, and then managing that in terms of their mental and physical robustness, I think is going to be even more of a challenge going forward. Even more of a challenge. The starting levels of athlete coming in are getting lower.
Coaches, how they operate, and then there's a management system. The management system is usually
Yes, because on well, there's so much choice now, because you can get it on the internet, and you can do gaming, or you can do, you think about the IOC, what's the calendar of events that are coming in skateboarding and rock climbing, and so there's more choice and therefore less focus. So, which means, and I just talked about, you've got to do a lot of practice to be very good at something, that's at odds with the environment that we're getting. It's a challenge,
Under pressure, choice, because you only can join.
We got some points,
Commit your data. That doesn't work.
Okay, okay, that would be good. No worries,
It's about personal security of our data.
How are you going? Okay.
Goes always, in a sense of personnel.
Global warming. It's just about sport, not big trends.
Every question about using data for research, how do you share your data? If it's the way you do it.
Okay.
Consultant.
Yes.
So if you want to join the program, the Olympic program, if you want to go to the Olympics, you have to sign that you apply to the rules and have no doping, and even that might be forced commitment, because you want to go there, so you don't even read what's said. So the way to go is that people from the beginning in the youth have a system that is able to collect their data, that coaches can fly in and out. So that new coaches
when we did some of the futurology work, there was a pharmaceutical group that came and spoke to us about.
Then you can go to national programs.
He talked about things being personalised, and he talked to us about even personalised gut care. In the future, you'll go into the pharmacy, and your infrared finger will go in, out will come, and then 3D vitamins will just come out straight away, especially for you. Everything about you, and then I would be different, and they would be your vitamin C and D.
Eye factor. Everyone wants to develop something for himself. There's no overview.
Yeah.
If you can combine the powers that want to develop this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have to see this table. How are you going? Yeah? What are the things you're worried about coming over the hill?
That there will be too much.
You don't get a gold medal without the 5%.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to work for it and have the right environment and all the other things, then it doesn't work too. So I've made systems that are able to measure physical match for different sports. So how long you're physical for volleyball, basketball,
One
platform. I had a list of
single devices.
different aspects of performance.
And that's where I think some of the futurology work we heard was, while technology will keep growing exponentially, so the role of coaches, the emotional intelligence of coaches will become even higher, because the technical stuff you coach in the future, they can get it. They'll get it off here, they'll get it off video, they'll get it off the scientists. But what they won't get from anybody else, from the people around them, is the emotional intelligence and the emotional support. And I wonder whether that will become, managing the emotional welfare of athletes will become even more with coaches in the future, because all the other bit they're going to get from, I don't know, somebody talked to us about that when we were studying. So, and coaches of the future will have to be incredibly emotionally intuitive. When you think about a lot of the mental health issues, 1 in 5 now have mental health issues, don't they? Just in society. So some of those are going to end up in elite sport programs.
Especially with all the old related. Super world right now we need to identify a person that any links to that. I find that some high performing athletes, maybe not super athletes, high performing, actually have more mental health issues on the lines of like anxiety.
So we've done some work in Britain about, is our level of mental health any worse or better than just normal population? It's the same. It's not worse or better.
On one hand, if you know the system.
We didn't separate into gold medalists. We just said medalists from Team GB and Paralympics GB, but it was not. 1 in 5 was 1 in 5. It wasn't any different. I'd imagine the complexity of managing them would be maybe a bit harder. because it's not like they're in a normal environment why they would be treated, I guess. So.
Any mental issues that come to the surface probably.
Yeah, and Paralympics is probably harder than the Olympics, I think. Some of the experiences that they arrive having had, where they might have had a very traumatic experience and then they come into elite sport programs, so that, you know, that's harder to manage. Yeah, I'll just go on and see how we're going. We right, Rosie, to wrap up? Should we get a couple to...
Yeah, if you get a couple to do that, and then Maria's going to take any questions.
Okay, yeah.
All right, you don't
no, that's fine, yeah, as long as, you're right. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Great Britain, America, I think.
Hey?
Far more.
Have they? Yeah.
System than it is in Holland. Because in Holland, the first thing
ask question, okay.
is sports.
Okay, no worries. Yeah.
It's only 1 hour a week. And
okay.
If you acknowledge that
we might
moving your body and
we might feed back and see where we got to. I think I've lost my microphone. Yes. He's gone for a cup of tea. Can you hear me all right? I might use that one, or actually, if you can spin that one around. So we're going to just pop round each table, and if you could just headline maybe 2 or 3 things, that would be quite interesting for the group to hear. Maybe this group down the front here first. Can we have the mic over to the group over here? Thank you. Disappeared. Okay. If you could stand up, thank you. If you could stand up, yeah, and just let us know what country you're from, and literally 30 seconds, bite-sized pieces. What did you discuss?
Okay, I'm Aid Roberts from British Rowing. The trends, looking in the crystal ball.
That's it.
It's a little bit of guesswork, but we have to consider what the IOC may determine for our sport, in terms of the faster, shorter, quicker environment seeming to be prevalent. So we have to consider that. So there may be an event structure change, or maybe not. But that's between FISA and the IOC, I guess. We also talked about the increasing prominence of full-time athletes, and that becoming a more global thing, and also the gap that then leaves to perhaps more sedentary youth who spend a lot more time at screens, and so the gap that they then have to try and bridge, and the stress that puts on the development pathway to get there.
That last point we were talking about. It was interesting when we were talking to the armed forces about the just basic fitness standards of cadets coming into the army, that those standards have dropped very, very significantly in the past 10 years. So the starting platform of physical literacy, physical fitness coming into performance environments is getting less. So there's this gap between general life, general public, and then coming into high performance programs. That gap's getting bigger and bigger, which has implications for performance programs and how they operate. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. I think the ladies up the back wanted to contribute something. Is that right? Yeah.
I think given our session this morning and knowing the commitments that you've made towards gender diversity, we felt that one of the trends you might see in rowing was a more equally balanced and more gender diverse coaching workforce in the future.
Yep. Managing female talent, and also to more female coaches coming into the system. Interesting, in Great Britain, only 10% of our coaching workforce is currently women, which is something that we're going to be doing quite a bit of work on in the next 4 years, particularly in light of the IOC changes to the calendar ahead. So, anybody here? Yeah? Thank you.
So with regards to Well, in this way, it's a mixture of how will highly successful performance leaders and coaches operate and managing athlete mental and physical health. What we're thinking is that as more and more information, especially about monitoring physical health, is becoming available, more of the responsibility can be shifted towards the athlete itself.
Yep.
And as coaches, we're going to be much more responsible than we are now for developing their mental health, where we don't necessarily have the same kind of knowledge yet as we would for physical health. And as a corollary of that, it probably means that as coaches, we're going to, let's say, try to personalize our training a bit more, even in larger crews, that we're going to really move towards individualized models of training and developing athletes rather than group models.
Interesting point about mental health. I think it's about 1 in 5 in the general public suffer from a mental health disorder. Interestingly, when we've looked across some elite sport programs, it's not any more or any less at the moment. It's about the same. So we're replicating the same trend as general public. That's not to say that the complexity of the issues, probably in elite sport and mental health, are more difficult to potentially manage. Up the back there, if you could just let us know what questions you looked at.
Thank you. We were looking at questions 5 and 6 regarding technology and data. We're quite fortunate in having 2 of the speakers from yesterday on our table, so it's a subject which is very close to them. There's already a huge amount of data available within the sport of rowing. The tools are becoming lower cost, so available to a wider audience, which obviously means there's a very large quantity of data that needs to be collected and stored, athlete themselves, or whether it belongs to the coaches, and how do you protect that going forwards. And then also, obviously, if you've got all this data, you need the skills to interpret it, and the more data there is, the more complicated it gets.
Thank you. One of the things we discussed in our Futurology workshops about data and big data and was then, therefore, what's the role of the coach going forward? So athletes can get access to information anywhere and immediately these days. In fact, you can even go online. If you type in gold medal winning training program in a lot of sports, they'll come up. They're there. They can access this. So we were talking a lot more about that, potentially the role of the coach in the future will be a lot more along the lines of providing emotional welfare, emotional intelligence to the performance, and probably less about some of the technical nuances of the sport, because just athletes can get that information, retrieve it from data and technology, interpret it. Whereas the role of the coach might be more about providing emotional support. So it'd be interesting to see, what this will pan out like going forward. Where's our roving mic? Up the back.
Thank you. We were talking on 1 and 2, and perhaps got stuck on trends and mega trends. Talked about that a little bit, and maybe the standout that hasn't been mentioned before, we're a very conservative sport. It's been around for a long time, and perhaps rowing's capacity to be relevant in the next 8 years may certainly change things. So we talked a little bit about agility and the capacity to be able to change, and whether we have that or not. Talked about race distances and relevance. Para rowing's just gone to 2K. And we were talking a little bit about watching the canoe events, which are extremely short, and it's all over within an hour, and it's very exciting. So maybe we have to rethink where we're at with that. And perhaps if I finish up saying the views are not necessarily my own, but they could be.
Well and truly, and commercialisation of sport, and as they talk about, track suits to business suits, and you think about the changes in the IOC calendar already in rock climbing and skateboarding and surfing. The signals are about how you can engage the audience. So what does that mean for your sport going forward? Maybe the table there.
Okay. Oh, do you?
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. So we were talking number 3 and 4, And number 3, we were thinking that maybe we should educate more to our athletes to understand themselves how to avoid, for example, injuries, and also so educate them about mental things and mental coaching, and also educate about physical health things, like how they can avoid injuries or infections or things like that. So in my opinion, we can do this better, on our opinion. Number 4, we think that coaches and performance leaders should be very good about organizations and coordinations, because and they have to be better to find the things that we need, because nowadays there are so many things that we can do. And for example, here we have seen a lot of technology, new technology, so you have to choose what you really need. And I think this is one of challenge for the future, because there are so many things you could do, but you can't do all of them. So good coaches has to be very good for choosing the best ones, choosing what they need, and be good for coordinations, all things together.
Yeah, so exceptional at filtering.
Yes, yes.
Finding the back to the coconuts and not the peanuts, and
yes,
in a very busy world where lots of stuff's going on.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Can I just make a point about physical health? One of the things that we learned when we were doing the Futurology, we were talking to healthcare specialists, and they gave us this remarkable story where not far off now, in about 5 years' time, we will be able to go into the local chemist. We have to put our finger under an infrared screen. It will screen our current health, and it will 3D produce vitamins and minerals very specifically for me and my gut care. Is actually where this is actually is going in the future, which was fascinating to kind of hear about, and how quickly this is actually all moving. So what does that mean about how we're managing health in a very personalised and customised way of our athletes going forward? Okay, brilliant. Some good ideas, some good future-focused thinking. So I'm going to leave you now with a quote. It's one of my favourite quotes. Which is actually, I think, what is the essence of this Talent Lab book that we talked about, which is about adapting. And this is Darwin, very famous, very wise man, that talked about it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, it's the ones that are most capable of adapting as fast as you can. And that takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to keep adapting and staying future focused. So thanks very much for your time. I hope that some of the information we shared with you today has been helpful and thought-provoking. And most of all, I wish you very, very the best of luck in your coaching careers ahead. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chelsea, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. We will also like to open the floor for questions, questions that you haven't already tackled during the interactive sessions. But Chelsea's here. It's a fantastic opportunity to really follow up on this very open and broad presentation. So I do open the floor to any questions that you want to throw at us.
Yes.
Chelsea, right at the beginning, you showed us a nice roadmap about the interdependencies of all the actors, governmental to local and sports and that. So this is history, but how it looks like today?
A lot simpler. If I had a picture, it'd be government, and the government has a collaboration and a contract, if you like, with the agency called UK Sport, which is us. And UK Sport disseminates the public investment out into 32 sports against a medal target. And the relationship between UK sport and the sports is about how we actually enable the sports to utilise that money to the best effect, to chain back up to the government outcome. And the government outcome is more medals and medalists to inspire the nation. So that's how the elite sports system works. Then we have a participation system that sits underneath that, where the government will then invest in the 4 home nations. And the 4 home nations are largely responsible for bringing through the next talent into the high performance system. So we're quite blessed in UK sport and the high performance system that it's quite a simple model. So it's one model in and one investment strategy down against one set of outcomes and and feeding back up, not into various different provinces or states or prefectures sometimes. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So in your talent development pathway, you talked a lot about the pathway towards becoming an elite or super elite athlete. What about their pathway for their post-athletic career? How do you prepare them for that?
Yeah, so it's quite a hot topic at the moment about duty of care and athlete welfare. And in the high performance system here, and as I would imagine we have in a lot of other systems, we have some pretty special people called performance lifestyle advisors. And they're actually core-funded by UK Sport, and they're employed through our Institute of Sport and deployed out into the sports. And they play a hugely significant role in ensuring that the athletes are thinking about life after sport, are thinking about the skills and capabilities that they might need for life after sport. And I'd probably say sometimes it's quite difficult to get the athletes to think about that, because all they want to think about is winning medals, and getting them to think about what might happen after that is often quite difficult when they're on that immediate journey. So we've got to keep working at that pretty hard. And I think what we're learning too, more and more, is the skills and experiences of what elite athletes develop over the course of their experience of coming through a pathway are phenomenal. And those skills and experiences can be transformable in other aspects of life, not even in elite sports. So they can come back as coaches, they can come back as finance directors. We had a lady in our office yesterday who was a multi-gold medal winning coach who's now very, very high up in Goldman & Sachs, and they just think she's amazing by her commitment, her attention to detail, her performance under pressure. And she will often talk about her skills in elite sport have taught her that. So how we can harness athletes that are coming through the system to be a real force for good in other industries or back into the elite sports system, we could definitely do a better job in that. I think we could all do a better job at that.
Chelsea, thank you very much for a wonderful and absolutely enlightening presentation. And I call back on Rosie.
Okay, I'd like to thank all of our presenters, because we've come to the end of our coaching conference in terms of external presenters, and we're about to move into the FISA part of it. So there'll be an update with Matt and JC, and all of the federation people that have been in the Federations Conference will come in to join us as well. We've had a very varied range of topics, quite a lot about technology, and I think the relevance to today of yesterday's topic of technology has come around in talking about the future of our sport and where we're going to be going and what we need to be thinking about. But also in terms of how we can use that to take us forward and to be future-proofing where we need to go as a sport. So I think very neatly, Chelsea has wrapped up quite a lot of our different areas that we've been talking about over the 2 days. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I hope you enjoy the FISA update as well. And we would welcome any feedback from you, and also if you have any topics or areas that you think we as a sport should be thinking about for coaches for next year's conference. It is actually going to be a sports science and medicine conference, but with coaching as well, and it's going to be in Berlin. So there will be more information coming about that. I think you've got flyers on your tables telling you about it. If not, we can give you the dates. So thank you very much, and please do come back for the next session, but thank you so far.